Hey guys, when we left off, and remember, I'm talking quietly because I'm trying not to wake my kids up. I think I might have woken Henry up, or at least I'm not helping him go to sleep because I just heard him holler from his room. So I'm going to try to be quiet. If it's too quiet, let me know and I'll fix them for the next time. But I'm just trying really hard not to wake my boys up because I don't want them up right now. I'm sure your parents can identify with what I'm saying. All right, so when we left off yesterday, Henry Huggins is going to start collecting night crawlers, which are big, gigantic worms that his next door neighbor likes to fish with, which sounds disgusting. But that's what he's going to do. And he has figured out that he needs 1,395 worms to pay for the football and 41 worms for the tax. So far so good, right? He's got a job. He's got something to collect. Let's see if anything goes wrong for Henry as he's collecting these night crawlers. Henry went around the rose bushes and tiptoed across the grass. Because of the doggy be gone, Ribsy stayed on his own side of the rose bushes. Henry turned on the flashlight, and sure enough, there on the grass was the end of a big, fat worm. But when Henry bent to pick it up, it was gone. He tiptoed farther across the grass and turned on the light again. This time he moved faster. He grabbed the end of the cold, slippery worm. Ugh, doesn't that just sound disgusting? The cold, slippery worm. The other end was already in the ground. Henry pulled and the worm pulled. The worm stretched. It grew longer and thinner until it snapped out of Henry's hand and disappeared into the ground. Ugh, said Henry. The next time he moved still faster. He pounced on the worm before either end had a chance to get into the ground, and he caught it. That's one penny, he thought. Ugh. You guys see it? I can never figure out. There we go. After that, it was easier. He caught most of the worms on the first pounce. Pretty soon, he had caught 62 worms. So think about that. If he gets paid a penny a worm, and he's caught 62 worms, how much money does he have? He's got 62 cents, right? That's not quite $13. He's still got a long way to go. Then he discovered he was running out of worms. Either he had caught all of Mr. Grumpy's worms, or they had felt him walking around on the ground and had retired for the night, and he hadn't earned enough to pay for the football. Just as Henry was wondering where he could find more worms, Mr. Grumpy came back from the store. "I caught 62 worms for you," said Henry. 62? That's great. Mr. Grumpy reached into his pants pocket and brought out a handful of change. He picked out a 50-cent piece, a dime, and 2 pennies and gave them to Henry. So we don't actually talk about a 50-cent piece very often when we talk about coins during calendar time. A 50-cent piece is a larger coin, and it's worth 2 quarters, so 50 cents. But we don't usually use that coin when we are learning about money. So think about it as 2 quarters. But he pulled out a 50-cent piece, a dime, and 2 pennies, so 50, 60, 61, 62, and gave them to Henry. "Thank you," said Henry politely. He wished he had caught more worms. Mr. Grumpy started to go into the house and then stopped. "Say, Shorty," he said to Henry. He was going back through the rose bushes. "I'll tell you what you can do. Sunday morning I'm going fishing with a bunch of men from my lodge. Quite a few of us are going, and we can use all the worms you can catch. Tomorrow night you get someone to help you and catch enough for all of us." "Sure," said Henry eagerly. "I'll catch hundreds of worms for you." "Swell. We can use them," answered Mr. Grumpy as he went into the house. Henry sat down on his front steps again. Because he needed so much money, he knew he would have to catch all the worms himself. That meant he would need a lot of wet lawn. His mother would be pleased, even surprised, to have him water the lawn. But his lawn and the Grumpy's lawn wouldn't be enough. Maybe he could ask all the people on the street to water their yards Saturday evening. However, if he did that, Beezus and Robert and the other kids would ask him what he was doing. Henry was afraid they would want to earn money catching worms too. He knew Beezus would want to. She was the kind of girl who would like catching worms. Henry sat on the steps, wishing he had acres and acres of wet lawn. He thought and thought about millions of wet green blades of grass with big fat worms peeping out from under them. The park, of course! That was it! It was only a few blocks away, and because September had been unusually warm this year, the grass in the park was watered every day. If his mother would let him stay up later than 9 o'clock, he knew he could catch enough worms to pay for the football. Henry went into the living room, where his mother was knitting an argyle sock. "Mother, could I stay up later tomorrow night?" Henry told his mother. after telling her the whole story. Mrs. Huggins put down the sock. "Henry," she said, "how do you manage to get yourself into such messes?" "Well, gee," said Henry, I didn't do anything. I just threw this football in." Yes, you told me," his mother interrupted. "Yes, you may stay up tomorrow night, but for goodness sake, Henry, after this, do be careful with other people's belongings." So I'm going to stop there, and I know that seems pretty short today, but tomorrow, in the book, the next paragraph starts Saturday, where he's going to try to catch all these worms. And so I think that's a good place to stop. So I want you to think about what could possibly go wrong with Henry trying to catch about 1,000 worms in one night. See you tomorrow.